I'm coming. This is...
You are also live.
I'm coming over there. I can see you.
Oh, that's good.
That's the law, you can see. There's a cat behind you having a bath.
Yeah. I'm trying to get it on my phone.
Why?
Because then I'll be able to see through Facebook who's out there.
Facebook.
Any chance you could
Yes, I'm going to try.
bring that device over?
Just trust me for a minute.
Right.
That's exactly what I was going to do.
Hello, Ether. If there's anybody there, I have absolutely no idea. Oh, a clue. Hello, Ether. I have absolutely no idea. Oh, a clue. I'm getting feedback. That's going to be very awkward. Yeah. Is anybody there? I have absolutely no idea. Oh, a clue. And to those who are online out there somewhere in the internet, we shall start at 7:30. Just giving a few minutes for people to join us. I won't name those who are typically latecomers when we're having services in the sanctuary, but just in case their habits extend to the internet, we'll give them a couple of more minutes. And we'll be using Shabbat service, evening service number 2, which is on page 75. My lovely assistant has joined us.
Can I use this book?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll need that at some point. There's.
Since you've nicked my store.
My watch is running, I think, a couple of minutes fast, so I'm going to check the real true time. Oh, still a couple of minutes. Yeah, Janet's going to tell me who's out there so we can say hello.
So, Shabbat Shalom to Deborah, to Meira, to Jason Thompson, Tina Higgins, Sybil Gilbert, Michelle Lafitte, Sandra Levine, Jill Hyman, Craig Simmons, Christine Lacher. Well, we have a lot of people.
Yeah.
Elke
says Shabbat Shalom also. And I think it's now close enough to 7:30 that we can start. I'll say again, we're using the regular Siddur, and on page 75, you'll find the beginning of Shabbat evening service number 2. You shall call Shabbat a delight. We're going to kindle some lights now as a symbol of joy, hoping that their brightness lifts our spirits, fills our hearts with happiness and peace. And maybe you have some candles at home to light as well. I'm asking Janet to light the candles here. This is our little travelling, well,
it's not
a travel set. It came from our visit to Cordoba. It's very pretty, and it uses tea lights rather than big candles. I'll show you in a minute when we've got them going.
Okay, I can do the blessing there.
I will do the blessing. Trying to, there it is, yes. So, a couple of candles. Now, we've lit them, and we mustn't do that on Shabbat. So we've got to pretend they're not lit yet, because we shouldn't really have lit them until the blessing.
Except that on Shabbat, we couldn't light them if we said the blessing. So
it's a conundrum that people have struggled with on Friday nights for centuries. Leaving you to light your candles and bless them in whichever order you wish. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav tzivanu lahadlik ner tzivanu lahadlik ner tzivanu lahadlik ner Shel Shabbat. Shabbat is descending to enfold us in a mantle of peace, bringing us a precious gift of time. Time to remember family and friends and to embrace them via the internet, if not physically, to reflect more deeply on the meaning and purpose of our lives and to worship in the beauty of holiness. May our Sabbaths always be sanctuaries of love and devotion, bringing contentment to our hearts, happiness to our home, and blessing to our people. And Janet's just stolen me book, so I can't tell you what page we're on next. On page 76, Shalom Aleichem. This tune's not one we use all the time. I think it's a really lovely melody. It's a little bit soft and gentle, and almost you could say carries with it the fact that it was one of the last things that Debbie Friedman composed before her untimely death from influenza, British influenza. She caught it at Limud. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem. Malachei Asharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Achem L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei HaMlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Achoni l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei HaMlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei HaMlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shuchem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei HaMlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet, Malachei Elyon. In the evening service for Shabbat, there's a series of psalms that traditionally get used. And tonight we could use Psalm 97. These are kingship psalms that each of them approaches in a different way, praising God as sovereign. But I wasn't planning to do that tonight. I'd like to sing Yedid Nefesh, which is on page 78. And the words for Yedid Nefesh, the original words, 16th century poem from Safed in Israel. Safed being Safed, thank you. The place where Lachad Odi was initially composed. The words, that is, the poem rather than the melodies that we use these days. We've only got two verses of Yedid Nefesh on page 78. The first letter of verse 1 is Yod. The first letter of verse 4, which is the only other verse on the page, is Hey. If we had the other two verses, then the initial letters would spell Yod Hey, Vav Hey, the letters that build the unpronounceable name of God. That's the sort of poetic device that people were fond of so many hundreds of years ago. And even missing verse 2 and 3, we could say we've got Yah, which is a shortened name for God. Yedid nefesh afarachama mushavtecha el ratzonecha yarotzavtecha kamoya yishtachave el moadorecha yeravlo yedidotecha Ino petzu b'chol tam. Ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 la. Show yourself, beloved, and spread over me the shelter of your peace. Illumine the world with your presence, and we will rejoice and be glad in you. Hurry, loved one, the holy day has come. Be gracious to us, as in days of old. So we can hear echoes of Lachad Odi in that verse. So we go now to page 92. I leave it to you.
I'll just also now welcome Joe Kaplan, Liz,
Shabbat Shalom, Joe.
Liz Kelly,
and Liz,
Rebecca Singerman Knight, Sandra Weber. And that's all I'm seeing at the moment.
Shabbat Shalom, you all, as I like to say in America. So it's your choice as to whether you stand for the Baruch Hu. I couldn't cope with all the things we're juggling here. Having to stand up and sit down again, it'd just be too much. And if you did stand, now you can sit. We praise you, Eternal One, Sovereign of the universe, whose word brings on the evening, whose wisdom opens heaven's gates, whose understanding changes times and seasons, and whose will sets the stars in their courses in the sky. You make day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light. You make day pass, bring on the night, and separate day from night. You rule the host of heaven. We praise you, O God, whose word makes evening fall. And do note that evening will be falling an hour earlier once we get past 2 o'clock on 2 a.m. on Sunday morning. You must put your clocks back. Ahavat Olam on page
93.
On page 93. At the moment, my favourite melody is one composed a few years ago, not too many, in London by a member of Finchley Progressive, I think, Dean Staker. And although you might not be able to sing along because you don't know it, I think it's such a nice tune that I'm hoping eventually you will know it. Ahavat Olam, Beit Yisrael, Torah u'mitzvot, Hukim u'mishpatim otanu lemadata. Alhen Adonai Eloheinu, Ve'inu nasiach b'chukecha, V'nilmach b'divrei Toratecha u'mitzvotecha, L'olam va'ed. Ki Yechayenu Borech Yameinu Negei Yomam V'Layla Ba'avatecha Al Tazum Imeinu Le'olami Baruch atah Adonai Ohev Amo Yisrael Baruch atah Adonai Ohev Amo Yisrael. And continuing now on page
94,
94.
top of the page with the Shema.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levacha v'chol nafshecha v'chol modecha v'hayu hadavarim ha'ele asher anochi matzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinontam levanecha v'dibata bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha v'olektecha v'derech v'shoftecha v'kumecha v'kshatam la'ot al yadecha v'hayu l'totafot beinenecha v'ktavtam al mezuzot beitecha v'fisharecha. Tizkaru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'yitem kadoshim le'Elohechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim v'yot lachem le'Elohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem. All this we hold to be true and sure. You alone, Eternal One, are our God, and we are Israel, your people. You freed us from oppressors and delivered us from tyrants. You led us out of Egypt, whether historically or in the current times, any personal Egypt that this pandemic has dragged you into. You can lead us out of Egypt forever to serve you in freedom. When we witnessed your power, we praised your name and gave thanks. Willingly we accepted your rule. Then full of joy we sang together. Thank you. Mi kamocha Palim Adonai, mi kamocha Nedava Kodesh, Nora Lehilo, all save Chaim lo l'olam. Amen. V'ne'amar ki fadeh Adonai et Yaakov ugalo mayad chazak mimenu. Baruch atah Adonai Ka'al Yisrael. Grant, eternal God, that we may lie down in peace. I think this is my favourite prayer of all of the evening service. Grant, eternal God, that we may lie down in peace. Let us rise up to life renewed. Spread over us the shelter of your peace. Guide us with your wise counsel, and for your name's sake be our help. Shield us from sickness and war, from famine and distress. Keep us from wrongdoing. Shelter us in the shadow of your wings. For you are our guardian and deliverer, a gracious and merciful God. Guard our going out and our coming in, that now and always we may have life and peace. We praise you, O God. May your sheltering peace descend on us and all who dwell on earth. I've reached page 97. Adonai sefatai tiftach, ufi agite hilatecha. Eternal God, open my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el, Hagadol, Hagibor, V'Hanorah, El Elyon. Gomel Chassidim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, V'Zocher Chazdei Avot V'Imahot, U'Meivi Geula Livnei B'neihem, L'Ma'an Shemo V'Yahava, Melech Chozer U'Mashiach U'Magen. Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham V'Ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Machayei Meitim Atah Rav L'Hoshir, Mashiv Haruach U'Morid HaGeshem, Mazriach HaShemesh U'Morid HaTal. Mechalchel Chaim B'Chesed, Machayei Meitim B'Rachamim Rabim. Somek Noflim V'Rofech Olim, U'Matir Asurim, U'Mechayev Emunato, Lishenei Afar. Mi Chamocha Ba'al Gevorot, U'Midom Elach, Melech Meimit U'Mechayev, U'Matzmiach Yeshua. V'ne'aman atah l'chayot meitim. Baruch atah Adonai, Machayei hametim. Kadosh atah v'norah shemecha. V'ein lanu Eloha mibaladecha. Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. We thank you, O God, for this Sabbath day, which calls us to a closer communion with you. Though you are near to us at all times, you reveal your presence most clearly when we direct our thoughts towards you in worship and meditation. I've stopped because if we were in the sanctuary, I'd surely be inviting you to read this along with me. So if you do have the Siddur in front of you, please do continue to read at the top of page 99 so that you feel that you're saying this prayer for yourself. In you, O God, our humanity is exalted. You are our life. From you come its greatness, its power, its beauty. Establish in us, we humbly pray, a devotion to you that shall be firm in all the circumstances of life. May this service renew in our hearts the sense of your presence and bring us peace. ושומרו בני ישראל את השבת, את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותה, ברית עולם. בני אלוהים בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. בני אלוהים בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש. I hope you caught the accompaniment to the final verse from Manny, the larger of our two cats.
That's Elkie, actually.
Was it Elkie? Mm. We're now on to page 100. Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu Ratzevim Nuchatenu Kadshenu b'mitzvotecha v'tein chelkeinu v'toratecha tzavenu mitovecha v'sachenu v'shuatecha v'tahel lebeinu v'avtecha be'emet. Chilenu Adonai Eloheinu v'avahu ratzon Shabbat kodshecha Shabbat kodshecha v'yanuchu v'Yisrael v'kadeshei shemecha. We praise you, O God, for the holiness of the Sabbath. Eternal God, be gracious to your people Israel, and in your love accept our prayers. May our worship now and always be acceptable in your sight. We praise you, O God, whom alone we worship in reverence. We give thanks that you, Eternal One, are our God, as you are the God of our ancestors. You are the rock of our life, the power that shields us in every age. We thank and praise you for our lives, which are in your hand, for our souls, which are in your keeping, for the signs of your presence we encounter every day, and for your wondrous gifts at all times, morning, noon, and night. We praise you, O God, source of goodness, to whom our thanks are due. I'm going to sing Shalom Brav. And I'm just going to make sure I use the right chords. Shalom Rav Israel Echad Hasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav Israel Echad Hasim Le'olam. Ki Ata Melech Adon L'chol HaShalom. Ki Ata Melech Adon L'chol HaShalom. Shalom Rav Israel Echad Hasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav Israel Echad Hasim Le'olam. וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל וכל העמים בכל עת ובכל שעה ישלומך שלום רב ישראל עמך תשיא לעולם שלום רב ישראל עמך תשיא לעולם תשיא לעולם. Baruch atah Adonai, Osvei HaShalom. This is the point in the service where you're invited to pray silently, listening to your own thoughts. What I wanted to do for the silent prayer this time was try and combine it with something we don't do every week, which is to look at the themed readings in our Siddur. And this week, the portion from Torah is the portion, let me give you a clue. I'm not sure if you can see that, but that's Noah's Ark, because this week it's the portion Noach. And in our Siddur, that portion is associated with conservation of the earth. And so I'm going to read you just a little bit from the themed reading. It's on page 166 if you want to find it for yourself. And then I'm going to sing a song that is associated with conservation in the hope that you carry on thinking about the way we can try to live in harmony with the earth, not wasting too much, not buying more than we need, not throwing away too much. The covenant God made with Noah is not, we now realize, an unconditional promise. Human beings have their part to play. Not only may they have to sow in tears so that they may reap in joy, but they must exercise restraint and live in harmony with nature so as to conserve its bounty and its variety for future generations, so that they too may reap in joy. Eli, Eli, Shelo Yegamel Olam, Achol Hayam, Rishru Shamayim, Barach Hashamayim, Tefillat Adam, Hakol V'Hayam, Rishru Shel Hamayim, Barach Hashamayim, Tefillat Adam. Oh God, my God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the water, the crush of the heavens, the prayer of the heart, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crush of the heavens, the prayer of the heart. I'm afraid I've written a sermon.
I can finish the sound first.
That one. This one. This week, we encounter Parashat Noach, the second portion in our annual cycle of reading from Torah. I've always casually assumed that Noah was a good guy. After all, it was his foresight, his shipbuilding skills that prevented the eradication of humanity. So, thank you, Noah. We might call Noah a hero, albeit a mythical one. And that thought led me to wonder, what might be a list of heroes drawn from our own times? I'm sure there's many names worthy of consideration. I'm sure also that we would not all offer exactly the same list. Now, given my own age and background, the first name that came to mind for me was Winston Churchill, whose wartime leadership made him a national hero then and during my childhood. But having started my list of heroes with Winston Churchill, I began to have doubts. By all accounts, Churchill consumed alcohol in quantities that do not set a good example. There are rumours of marital infidelity. We know he used armed troops against striking miners here in the UK. His own writings reveal a belief in the superiority of his race above others. And possibly not vigorously anti-Semitic or Islamophobic, but he did ascribe racial characteristics to those religious groups in a way that would attract criticism today. So, if someone who has been seen by many as Britain's greatest modern hero might have flaws on close inspection, what about Noah? We could start, maybe we should start, by looking at Torah. And we find in Genesis chapter 6, verse 9, Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time. He walked faithfully with God. And then a bit later, Noah did everything just as God commanded him, which is to say, he built an ark, he gathered his family, he gathered breeding pairs of all animals, food for everybody and the animals, boarded the ark. When the land was dry again, they emerged from the ark. Noah offered a sacrifice to God, and God responded with a promise to never again destroy humanity. A covenant sealed by a rainbow. Noah and his family then settle the land. Noah builds a vineyard. So far, so good. But he drinks wine to the point of collapsing naked in a drunken stupor. Ham, the youngest of his three sons, takes advantage of him. And Noah, on waking, possibly with a raging hangover, curses Ham's son, Canaan, wishing perpetual servitude upon his tribe. So when we look more closely at Noah, we've got drinking to excess, we've got possibly an inability to control his temper. These are definitely bad marks. But on the other hand, we've also got, quoting Torah, blameless amongst the people of his time, or did everything just as God commanded him. These look like they could be good marks, but not every rabbi has thought so. A little bit of background on how we know what rabbis have thought. Ever since the initial compilation of the written Torah, which is probably some 2,500 years ago, scribes and scholars and rabbis have debated the meaning of every verse in Torah, almost every word. Initially, the conclusions of their debates, which were often an agreement to disagree, were passed orally from one generation of scholars to the next. That's called the oral Torah. And then in the 3rd century of the Common Era, a compilation of this oral Torah was committed to a 6-volume text called the Mishnah. Rabbinic discussions continued, of course they did. And in the 5th century of the Common Era, a compilation of their most noteworthy opinions was added to the Mishnah, and that addition formed the Talmud. Mishnah plus commentary upon it. So we have the Torah, then we have the commentary on the Torah, which is the Mishnah, and then we have the commentary on the Mishnah, and put the lot together, we've got Torah and Talmud. Well, in the Talmud, we can find one rabbi arguing that being blameless in his generation means that Noah was indeed an exemplary person. But then another rabbi argues that Noah appeared to be righteous only because everybody around him was definitely not righteous. Well, this idea of relative righteousness could lead us back to Winston Churchill, arguing that his caricaturing of Jews and Muslims and his assumption of a hierarchy amongst races was commonplace in the late 19th century, early 20th century. So we might then call him remarkable in his generation, so allowing him as well as Noah to be heroic, even if not flawless. I'm going to try a little bit of Torah commentary myself. So here we go. In chapter 31 of Deuteronomy, Moses is commanded to write down a set of verses to be taken to heart by every Israelite. Those verses are probably the following chapter, the so-called Song of Moses. Nevertheless, early rabbis built from this commandment an understanding that each individual Jew is commanded to not only study Torah, but also write their own Torah. Later rabbis argued that this did not imply that everyone has to write their own Torah scroll, but rather that each of us have a personal obligation to develop our own Mishnah. That's our own personal commentary on, our own personal understanding of Torah. So with that in mind, I'm going to have a go. Focus on Noah, that the tribe descending from one of his grandsons, a son of Ham, would be subservient to those tribes descending from Noah's other sons. This grandson's name was Canaan, as is the name of the Israelites' promised land. In the Hebrew Bible, the name of an ancestor, his tribe, or the land they inhabit are often one and the same. So Canaan could mean the boy, the grandson, could mean the tribe that followed from him, could mean the land, the promised land. What meaning might we draw from Noah wishing subservience upon Canaan, wishing subservience on the promised land? Early rabbis argued that Noah's curse justified the conquering of the land of Canaan by the Israelite descendants of Noah's other sons. I want to draw a different meaning. Now, this is my personal Mishnah. You're free to continue Jewish tradition by disagreeing with me. It struck me that aspirational dreams, such as the dream of a promised land, might come with an attached penalty. The price we might pay for focusing our attention on something we don't have, but we believe will solve all our problems, is to lose sight of what we do have, and so fail to make the best of that opportunity. In the biblical context, maybe the reason why the Israelites spent 40 years in the wilderness, maybe it could be that because their focus was on the promised land of Canaan, it took them that long, so much longer, to realize that learning how to live together was more important than where they were going to be living. Same idea in our own times. Those who think they can only live a Jewish life if they move to Israel or North London risk losing sight of the essence of Judaism. Where you live is not the most important thing. Where you live is subservient. As the prophet Micah put it, what is essential is to deal justly, delight in acts of kindness, and walk humbly with your God. And we continue now on, I would imagine, page 520. On page 520, there is no law saying the Aleinu has to be read in Hebrew, so here we go. Let us now praise the sovereign of the universe and proclaim the greatness of its creator, whose unity it is our mission to make known, whose rule it is our task to make effective. We bow in awe and thanksgiving before the Supreme Sovereign, the Holy One, ever to be praised, who spread out the heavens and established the earth, whose glory fills the highest heavens, whose might extends throughout all space, who alone is our God, for no other exists, who in truth is our sovereign, for there is none else. As it's written, know then this day, and take it to heart, the Eternal One is God in the heavens above and on the earth below. There is no other. And I like the poem by Judy Chicago that's on page 213. You see, the point of having the Aleinu in the service, it's been there for centuries, is to finish the service with a little bit of sort of positive psychology, looking forward to a redeemed world rather than leaving on a low note. And now on page 213, thinking of what a redeemed world would look like. And then all that has divided us will merge, and then compassion will be wedded to power, and then softness will come to a world that is harsh and unkind. And then both men and women will be gentle, and then both women and men will be strong. And then no person will be subject to another person's will, and then all will be rich and free and varied. And then the greed of some will give way to the needs of many. And then all will share equally in the earth's abundance. And then all will care for the sick and the weak and the old. And then all will nourish the young. And then all will cherish life's creatures. And then all will live in harmony with each other and earth. And then everywhere will be called Eden once again. You see, even the Kaddish, which we're moving to in a minute, is an upbeat prayer. It's a discipline, a challenge to, even when thinking about the fact that the people we love or value are no longer with us, that still we can approach God in a positive mood. But before the Kaddish, and I'm sorry I'm not clever enough with all this internet stuff to invite names for...
Yes, you could. Read them, so invite names.
Well, Janet's willing to read out names. If you can type the name of anybody for whom you'd like Yahrzeit to be remembered. Anybody who's in your heart, in your mind, when you're thinking of saying Mourner's Kaddish. Excuse me.
Do you have a list in the congregation?
And there's quite a short list from KLS this week. The congregation is remembering Philip Miller, who's grandfather to KLS member Carl Manuel. And waiting now to see whether any names come through for the Kaddish.
I'm not seeing anything.
Okay, so I'm reading now from page 522. Creator of the universe, you give us life, in which joys and sorrows are commingled in accordance with your wisdom, and you send death with its promise of eternal peace. Teach us to accept humbly and courageously whatever burden is laid upon us. Comfort those who mourn. Let the light of faith illumine the darkness of their sorrow with the hope of immortality. Strengthen us at all times with an unfailing trust in your providence. Still no names. No. Okay. So on page 524, let's all say the Kaddish. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah v'alma divrachirutei v'yamlik malkatei v'hayachon v'yomachon v'chayei dekol Beit Yisrael v'galal v'zman kari v'imru Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah v'barak le'olam le'ol ma'al Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'al v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalei v'yitalal Shemei dekudishah b'richu La'ela min kol v'yechata v'shirta tushbachata v'nechamata Damiran ve'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei Shlomo Rabbah min Shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Osei shalom b'mrama Ruya osei shalom Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol b'nei Adam v'imru Amen. I'm not aware of much by way of announcements, and Craig's hard work with the weekly bulletin means that anything important is available to you by email. I should have explained at the start that Rabbi Renee is having a holiday. Can you imagine how much hard work goes into preparing for the High Holy Days, all the way from Selichot through to Simchat Torah? I know from living with a rabbi that that's really hard work. So Renee's having his well-deserved break, but before going, he did record a Torah reading and a sermon. So you'll hear from him tomorrow with his pre-recorded reading and sermon. And the service will be at the normal time tomorrow. Concluding song. I'm hoping you can sing along with Ma Yafeh Hayom. How lovely is this day? If we make it a lovely day, Shabbat. Ma Yafeh Hayom, Shabbat Shalom. Ma Yafeh Hayom, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom to you all. We're going to have Kiddush now. I'll give you a couple of seconds just in case you've completely drunk the bottle of wine that you got out at the start of the service and need to go and get another one. Okay, we've opened a very nice sweet wine. We didn't get a challah this week, but we do have some bread, so we can do motzi. Janet's just gone to get our last slice of bread.
But Rebecca has baked a beautiful challah. I've seen pictures of it. Rebecca Singerman Knight, the first ever challah making experience.
Well done, Rebecca. So the picture's on Facebook, is it?
Yeah.
On the KLS Facebook? Or
no, it's on her Facebook page.
So if you're Facebook friends with Rebecca Singerman Knight, you can go and have a look at her challah. And I hope she's out there in the ether breaking bread with us.
She said she brought her challah.
Good.
She was there with the cats and her challah.
So, Kiddush. Kiddush means making holy or celebrating the holiness. And it's actually Shabbat that we're celebrating the holiness of. The wine is a go with. So first the blessing over wine and then Kiddush. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho v'ahav ratzon infilanu, zikro l'masnei b'reishit, ki hu yom techil v'levikrei kodesh, zechel et tziat Mitzrayim. Tivanu v'charta, otanu kedashta mikol hamim, v'shabbat kodshecha, v'yahava uvratzon inchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh ha-shabbat. L'chaim. I'm asking Janet to make motzi.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen.
Yeah.
Oh, all that for me. Thank you very much. Perhaps I should save a bit for breakfast.
Breakfast is cancelled.
So I'm going to say Shabbat Shalom and leave you to your own Shabbat. And I hope you find a way of making it a relaxing day.
Oh, Neil has baked his first challah as well today. My goodness.
Goodness. I feel a little bit of a competitive spirit. Maybe I should have a go. Or maybe I should hope that Janet does.
I do sometimes.
So I'm just going to be chewing from now on. So I'll say bye-bye. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shalom, everyone.